Hello everybody. Today I want to talk a little bit about Dahlia. Her beta came out like 4 or 5 days ago at this point, and finally we've gotten a solid amount of showcases for me to really give a opinion on. So without any bullshit, let's just get straight into it. Right. Let's start off with the Ruan Mei dilemma. Right. Does she actually completely replace Ruan Mei like I originally predicted? And the answer is, it depends, right? From what I've noticed in Sustain, a lot of people like to not run Ruan Mei and instead run Fugue plus Constance, right? But I have seen the complete opposite in Sustainless, to the point where it feels like Dahlia and Ruan Mei are 100% best in slot for each other in Sustainless. And even if people do still prefer using Fugue in Sustain, I think if you have an Ruan Mei, and especially an E1 Ruan Mei, because we've now been given 2 tokens, and that can probably be competitive with a Fugue, and it can make your life a lot easier, right? So I have to say, I don't really think she completely replaces Ruan Mei, and for those with really good vertical investment into their break teams, because break teams usually can run Sustainless a lot easier as compared to most normal teams, then you're probably actually going to keep Ruan Mei no matter what and put her alongside the Dahlia, right? So Ruan Mei is in the clear, at least in my opinion, from the showcases I've seen. Now, how big of a buff is Constance exactly? Well, I think she's a very significant buff, right? Constance, I wouldn't say that she makes any of the break DPSs, including Firefly, actually like on the level of the Amphorius DPSs, though, caveat here, with Cyrene, right? If you remove Cyrene from a lot of, or, well, not a lot, but a few of these Amphorius DPS's teams, I genuinely think Firefly and her best in slot team with Constance is competitive with some of these Amphorius DPS's like My Day and Aglaya and Herda, right? That might sound blasphemous, but hear me out. Firefly, I believe, has a E0S1 6 cost 0 cycle against the upcoming 3.8 MOC reset, which has Bronya and as well as Cocolia, and Bronya is weakness locked. And this MOC has noticeably higher HP. This is when the HP inflation is going to hit 3.7 reset. We are currently in the 3.6 reset, which is easier, right? So that is in a much harder MOC reset as compared to what we have currently, achieving a 6 cost 0 cycle against a weakness locked Bronya. Because for those who don't know, if the person attacking on the team has a matching element to the weakness of an enemy on the team, even if they're weakness locked, you can still do super break damage against them, which is probably the main appeal that people are going to be pulling Constance for. She fixes a lot of the flaws that break has that people have been complaining about for a long time, being that you can't do super break damage until you actually go through the break bar, and weakness locked enemies can completely counter them. This is no longer the case if you use Dahlia. Right. So, although I don't think it puts her on, top tier Amphorius DPS level, and I wouldn't say it puts her on Amphorius DPS levels with their best in slot teams with Cyrene, it puts her far enough to the point where she can 100% be viable for clearing current endgame content. Constance also has really strong vertical investment, so you can easily make the team even stronger. And then also, I'm pretty sure it is still planned for Firefly to get a buff somewhere in early version 4. So if this is the case, then Firefly would even further skyrocket, and I'd actually argue she'd be at minimum top tier Amphorius DPS levels even with Cyrene, if she gets buffed, because Constance is just that crazy of a buff to break. I'm not even just solely speaking about Firefly here. Soydon, if you want to check them out on YouTube, recently made a showcase showing DPS HMC with, I believe, Constance, Fugue, and Ruan Mei, and this team got a 1 cycle against 3.7's Sam MOC. Right, that is incredibly impressive. That is an 11 million HP single target boss getting 1 cycled by full E0 team, I believe, with Lycones of course, and a DPS HMC. That is really, really fucking disgusting. So I have to say, Dahlia is seeming like a must pull for break. And even though she doesn't give as big of a buff to Rappa and Boot Hill as she does to Firefly, from what I've seen nonetheless, she can still be a very, very nice buff. And since break in the first place doesn't have all that great of vertical investments outside of Firefly in my opinion, I would just highly recommend picking up Constance if you're looking to make your break team last longer going into the future. Right. Now, there is a side of this topic that no one really talks about, and it's understandable because it's pretty uncertain. However, the question is, will they release a DPS that is break to have good synergy with Constance, right? Because they could really just go ahead and do this. We haven't had a single fire DPS in the entirety of version 3, so they're completely open to being able to do something like this in version 4. However, I'm iffy on it, right? Because in 4.0, we are already getting a fire DPS, which is Hanabi, or now changed to Hanami. She is already rumored to be a fire elation DPS, so I don't think they're going to make her break, considering that she's supposed to be best in slot with her old self being Sparkle. Doesn't really make sense to be a break oriented character, right? So it's a 50-50 on whether or not you want to believe that Constance will get future DPSs that can take better advantage of her, or if she's simply there to buff older characters. I'd say very similar to Cypher. I don't feel like Cypher is best in slot for literally any of the Chrysos heirs, which is pretty disappointing, but she did buff Acheron quite noticeably and her ability to clear endgame content, so I could 100% see this being a type of Cypher situation where Constance is so strong she'll still be very worth it even if you don't have the best in slot DPSs or all the DPSs, but it's unlikely that she's really going to be meta in a way, right? She's going to be really good for the older team, but not really anyone who's new. Let me know your guys' thoughts down in the comments if you're keeping up with the showcases. Do you agree with what I'm saying? I genuinely think she is a very, very big piece to the puzzle of allowing your break DPS to perform much, much better against the endgame content, right? I understand if people don't want to invest into that. You know, it's upcoming elation meta, new version, new power creep. Do you really want to keep investing in making your older team stronger, especially a version 2 team of all things? That at the end of the day is always going to be up to you, because depending on how much you like a character, you may not care about how much value you're losing on your pulls. But yeah, love you all. Hope you have a great day. Hope you have a great night, and peace out.